So welcome. This is Realise Resilience. I'm Alister Gray, and I am joined by a very good friend of mine, Richie Norton. Richie, it's great to have you.
It's good to be here, man. It's been a nice little catch-up we had there. It's good.
Well, before we started filming, Richie and I said we'd have a 10-minute catch-up, which has turned into an hour.
All good stuff, though. All good stuff. I'm hyped now. I'm really like... I feel like we've already had a bit of a cleansing session. It feels like it's going to be a beautiful little conversation.
Well, it was a well-needed catch-up. I think we've both been running pretty busy schedules, and you know, I'm grateful knowing how, you know, a man in demand you are, Richie. So I'm grateful for you contributing your time to this project, movement, campaign. Who knows what we're creating? But it's as I was explaining to you, it's something that's been born out of nothing and is gathering momentum. So to have you contribute means a lot, you know, to myself, to Ariane, to everyone else who's involved. So thank you so much.
Good to be part of it.
And for those of you that don't know Richie, you know, Richie and I have formed a great relationship as friends, as mates. But you know, Richie's journey's been one that fascinates me. And originally I was watching from afar, you know, although we'd known one another as we've kind of grown up, I suppose, through our 20s and 30s. You know, Richie's journey is one from, you know, rugby player through to yogi. And I know throughout that experience, it's taking you down so many different paths, Richie, from capoeira to surfing to XPT to fitness to breath work to ice baths. I mean, you name it, Richie's done it. And I'm always kept entertained by, you know, seeing everything you're up to on Instagram. So it's great to have you, Richie. And like I said, it's a journey that I'd love to learn more about and to share with the audience as well. So yeah, maybe a good place to jump in is, obviously we're talking about the theme of resilience, and your journey has been a fascinating one. So I would love to just hear your story and, you know, hear kind of the story, the journey that you've been on, but also those periods of adversity and challenges that you've faced and how you've, you know, managed to find your own inner resilience through those moments as well.
Yeah. When you first asked me about sharing this, I thought, well, we could probably do a few days to try and strip this down and break down all the components of resilience, you know. And I think to shrink it down, start from scratch, I think we're all going to face some sort of resilience. And I've come to accept that as being actually part of the story that I enjoy telling more than anything else, because I was able to work through challenges or obstacles that at the time were like really scary or really frightening or super intense, and being able to push through it with a little bit of help from friends or just digging a little bit deep into your own passion and enthusiasm and pure grit. Yeah. You come out the other side learning a lot, even if it wasn't always a successful outcome. The resilience comes from digging deep and actually embracing the challenge. And the short version of my childhood, I grew up in the Middle East for a start. I didn't go to junior school. I was living in the desert racing camels as a child. Random story. A lot of people don't know about that about me, but it's because my dad worked on oil rigs as a geologist, and we moved from the UK. I was born in Leeds. That's where the northern twang kicks in. And that kind of set me off in a very interesting start to life, where when we eventually moved back to the UK, when I was still 7, but I was still a kid. But I kind of, like, you know, you do a lot by the time you're 7 years old. As you know, there's a lot that's going on in here and in here that kind of like steers you on a path. Mm-hmm. So when I came back to the UK, I went to a school in the village in Cheshire, and I was the oldest in my year. I joined late. Eyes were on me. Who's this kid? Got a lot of bullying earlier on, and I had to kind of, like, you know, that's a form of like toughening up. And I think from that age, I was always looking for opportunity to try and distract myself from the things that I found were challenging and things that I didn't want to confront, or things at home not being great, and wanting to just divert my attention, not having to face that, and finding things to constantly distract myself with. And rugby came around, turns out I was quite good at it. I feel like I was probably this big when I was 7. I didn't grow after that. So I was quite dynamic, you know, I was strong, I was fast, you know, being very active as a kid. I felt like I've always been, you know, strong and fit and healthy. And rugby became like my discipline. It became where I de-stressed. It became where I let off some steam. It became where I had some fights. It became where I was able just to embrace something that I had that I felt was an ability and a skill, and I was able to flourish. But really, I was kind of just letting off steam and destroying people on the pitch, and that was kind of my game plan, right? But the reason I say that is because back then I remember I was facing challenges that I really was scared to confront, and I was trying to find ways to not have to deal with it because it would be upsetting, and I wasn't able to share my feelings, my emotions. And going through teenage years, still playing rugby, you know, getting better and better, more opportunities. School and bullying was always still there because I was always having eyes on me. There was always attention on me, and always lads that were older than me and bigger than me were always trying to bring me down a peg. And so I was constantly kind of facing this challenge. And again, I usually took it out on the rugby pitch or prove myself in other ways. And that kind of like deep rooted ability to move past things and or just face it, you know, head on. I think back now, I realize that's all part of the story of where I am now, appreciating those as lessons. And rugby was lucky. I was lucky to have rugby, till my mid-20s and travel around the world. I got to play in New Zealand, and I got to play in America and Portugal, and I was able to live this great life and travel around. But it was still a form of me running away and not wanting to live up or face reality that this may be not a career forever, because I was having injuries and not knowing what I was going to have to come back on, because I built my whole life around rugby. So when the next kind of challenge became the injuries and getting super depressed, that all of a sudden my role, my position as a rugby player and being this professional person, we lost you for a second there, became a chance to dig a little bit deeper and actually lean into whatever it is that I'm having to face to get through the other side of this. And it went like that before it started to go like this. And that was when I moved to London, and when I started to lose my way in the whole London scene and get completely lost with my purpose, my identity, always wanted to be in the thick of things and be the life and soul of every gathering and party, and completely lost, but also holding on to a lot of the pain of stuff happening with family that was quite hard, and I didn't face up to it, didn't ever really approach it or address it with anyone. It's kind of like suppressing a lot. Being a rugby player, we don't really talk about our feelings. We don't all sit around a table, have cups of tea and share our emotions. We've got to put on a bit of a front, right? So whatever's going on, as emotional beings that we are, we got to bottle it. And that can only last for so long. And I started to see it and hear it in various different stories from friends, and having some losses to like some of my rugby mates who, got into some really dark places and didn't feel there was any way out, was the biggest wake up I ever had. And that still sits with me now when I think about the loss of friends, and thinking that there was no way out for them other than to end it, was the biggest wake up for me, to realize that I knew there was more to life. I just had to work a bit deeper and communicate the way I wish they'd communicate with me. And that was kind of the very uncomfortable unpacking of trying to work forwards into the darkness of not quite knowing where it was taking me, and it being quite uncomfortable and feeling quite lonely, but knowing that the work I had to do and the work I was doing on myself, through luckily having some friends in places that understood and gave me space, allowed me to share, allowed me to talk, allowed me some room to like understand and connect with really what I felt was my true calling, and trying to piece it together into a role, a job, a purpose, a physical action, a place to live, an environment. And I had to, one piece at a time, try to get myself in a better position to feel confident enough to take those next steps. And the resilience of just me having to dig deep through what could have been a very easy turn in another direction, which, if I look back at it now, wouldn't have ended very well, again becomes part of the story that empowers me now. It gives me confidence to speak to other people, knowing that I can imagine what it might be like to be in the position they are, and to give them room to be that person that that friend of mine was to me. And to know that those challenges will become your power. Those obstacles will become your strength, will become your learning. And I mean, one of the jumps for me was changing my environment. And when you can feel a bit claustrophobic and everything around you is kind of like bringing you down, it can be a bit like, there's just no space. And the power and the confidence and the motivation to drive through and become resilient can just feel like dampening and just too much. And it can just weigh you down. So what I found helped me was, one, I kind of went to the other side of the world. I moved to Australia. That's a bit of a rash move to most, but it was presented to me, so I went with it. But it was a change of environment. I met someone who took me to a yoga class. Never before as a rugby player has yoga been on my radar. That was for girls in spandex. You know, you would have got laughed out of the club if you told someone you were doing yoga. So I gave it a go. Was shocking at it. Terrible mobility, shocking flexibility, didn't know how to breathe properly, and I was supposed to be an athlete. And I joined a college. I had to get a student visa, and I thought, well, let's learn about training, because I like that. Let's learn how to be a coach. Let's learn how to be a personal trainer. It happened to be a Brazilian college that also taught capoeira. Capoeira looks again like a bit of a Brazilian dance with some music. It's basically like becoming a circus athlete, gymnast that also is a badass. And it really resonated with me. So I connected capoeira to movement and challenging body weight practices. I lost loads of weight. I became more agile. My yoga practice was introduced to me by, again, one of my capoeira teachers, who also introduced me to surfing. Surfing became my addiction. I was in the water every day. My injuries went away. My mood went through the roof. I started to enjoy my training again. I started to connect with nature again. I started to see the glow in my face again. And that was the beginning of this new chapter for me, that's given me a new chance, a new opportunity. So yeah, there's a bit of insight into quite a long intro, but I think that sort of sets the context of each day is going to present some sort of challenge and obstacle. But if you have the right goal and the right mission, the right vision on your purpose and what you're trying to achieve and what you want to continuously work on, and the feeling of, you know, that good energy that comes with that vision is one of the biggest driving forces, to know that the challenges that we've been through are just building more strengths. And I feel like everybody has the ability to tap into that. It just might take a little bit of work and a bit of self-reflection to find out what that driving force is for you, and your purpose and your why, and why you're here, whatever that is. And once you tap into that, even on a small level, you start to take better care of yourself, look after your health, look after your mental health. And the resilience gets stronger and more powerful, that you can then start to infect other people with that energy and bring them along for the ride. And that's what I'm here to do.
It's amazing. And you've said so much, you know. I
yeah,
think,
sorry, I get a bit carried away.
No. I'm not saying that in a negative way. You know, there's things I learned about you that I never knew, Richie. I never knew about camel racing. You know, that's
not many people know about that, for you know.
I also never knew about the, you know, how you got introduced to capoeira and surfing, you can see you light up when you start talking about, you know, when you found.
I'm sweating actually. I get so excited. I'm sweating.
But when you found these experiences that connected you to a deeper part of yourself. But, you know, thank you for sharing, because there were many challenges that you mentioned throughout, you know, starting from, you know, bullying, moving country, which is a change in itself as a young person, you know, in our kind of formative years. All of these changes are difficult. Then rugby, then the injuries, and then the darkness that you experience not only within yourself, but, you know, seeing other friends go through depression, suicide. You know, these are challenges in life that throughout your experience there have been many. And you said some really poignant things that connected to me, was about in those moments you kind of, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but you talked about taking those small steps in the right direction. You talked about asking for help. You recognized the need to be listened to, you know, probably from feeling pain that you'd seen others go through an experience where they never spoke, where they never talked about their challenges, where they never shared their emotions because it wasn't the thing to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, something that really shone out of your story was how you reflect on those moments of darkness and you've used them as a lesson. You've used them as the opportunity to find the gift amongst all of that, and then take that and apply it in a way that moves towards a more positive outcome. You know, so what was it in those moments that allowed you to look at things in that way? And I'm sure it wasn't always that clear, right? When we look back on things, it seems much easier to join the dots, but
yeah,
how did you manage in those moments to take the small steps? Because there's a lot of people at the moment who are no doubt facing mental health challenges, whether it's anxiety, depression. And, you know, mental health speaks to my heart, Richie, because I come from a family that have suffered from mental health challenges. You know, it's one of the reasons why I'm on this mission and purpose as well. But what was it in those moments that gave you hope, that helped you to move forward and take those smaller steps?
I find we all have this deeper ability to be an incredibly resilient human being. We just get a little bit lost. And that can be a factor of a few different things, whether it's your environment, the people around you, your upbringing, you know, the things that you read, the things that you listen to, the things that you watch. And it can start to dampen down our true fire, our real driving force, and our true purpose. We're all here, I feel, to offer something, to bring something of purpose to our own lives, to the lives of others. And it was the deeper feeling when I'd find space, when I was out in the ocean, when I was sat on my surfboard, when I was in a meditation trying to cross my legs in one of my first yoga classes. And it'd be this moment of clarity or this little bit of a gut feeling. And it would come to me. Sometimes it's like a little wandering daydream, because I'd given myself a bit of space, a bit of time to slow things down, to get that feeling, to connect with that feeling again, and to get these little moments of clarity, or a little vision would come in. And sometimes in conversation with people, somebody you'll meet that will inspire you, like a conversation like this, and it will trigger something that you've maybe neglected or forgotten about. And it will just reconnect you with that thought or that emotion or that feeling. And that would then steer me on a path, because I wouldn't ignore it. I'd act. I'd either write it down, or I'd talk about it in a social media post because it really triggered me, or I'd sit with it a little bit more and maybe have a conversation with someone else and unpack it a little bit more. But I would never ignore that calling. I would never ignore that opportunity to do the work, whatever that work might be, no matter how little it was. And that allowed me to then feel more comfortable stepping into uncomfortable silences, which before I try and fill with some chat and I'd waffle away or I'd distract myself. And it became really important then to just keep leaning in and to not be afraid of the confrontation or whatever might come up, even though it might be a bit uncomfortable. to then make that bit of more effort and be more enthusiastic to put the work in and see what came up and not be afraid to confront it. And that for me was a form of resilience when I could have just given up and very easily got distracted again, because we're constantly being distracted, right? Our attention span is so short. We're so easily distracted. We're consuming information. It can be overwhelming. Mental health, I find now, is under so much pressure because we're over consuming and we're not able to connect with the information, because it's just passing through us and bouncing off us, and we're comparing our lives to other people's, and we're losing our way, and we're being pressured to do this. This wasn't quite what we wanted to do, but we feel a bit stuck. And we don't give ourselves the space to kind of connect with what we really should be doing. And that it's not actually that hard just to steer your attention, or just to start something that is your true core and that does lift your energy, that does make you happy. And then you can find a balance between all of it to eventually steering yourself down that to being your full purpose. And I find sometimes people look at the big scale and the spectrum, all the things you've got to figure out, all the things you want to achieve in your life before you can call it complete. And then nothing ever happens, because that's just so overwhelming. Yeah. And that can be a mental health battle in itself, because you're thinking about your past, your other failures, the things that you didn't overcome, the things that cause you a bit of pain, or just the pure challenge of what that obstacle actually is. So you never start, or you give up before you've even got past that next chapter. So for me, I look at all these things and I think, right, we've talked about this before. What's the thing that I feel is the obstacle that if I tackle it, it's really going to allow me to make that next step? And then the next step is going to make sense because I've already overcome this chapter. So that might be a bit of a roundabout way to answer that question, but I feel that's important to mention, or at least give people the opportunity to step back and change the perspective a little bit, because there's always something you can do. You just have to sometimes give yourself a little bit of space and the silence or the change of environment to maybe recognize that you've gone off track, or there's something you could be doing better. And there's always something we can do to get ourselves back. There's always an option. And that's kind of like the internal dialogue that I go through every time I'm faced with these challenges before I make that next step. So I'm hoping that if people listening to this would see that as an opportunity to go, do you know, wherever I am, there has been some things that I've had this feeling of that needs to change, or I'm not happy with. There's a few things I've been wanting to work on, but I've been putting it off. Do the work. Because there's something we can be doing today that will allow us to tap into that emotion, that feeling, that vibe, that can spark something in us to put in the work again tomorrow. And then see where you go with that, because the ride is worth it, even if it's a bit like that.
I've never seen one that's not like that. But you know, something you said there, Richie, is you know, really important, I think, to capture, is that you've talked about that space, that need to reflect, right? And you and I, before we came on to the interview, talked about writing and, you know, even just taking some time to ask the deeper questions. I know you're a big fan of writing and journaling, and you mentioned even sharing on social media, but that space and that reflection time is key, right? You're probably getting calls, Richie, I know.
Yeah, so I just realized why. I don't know why that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You know, you put this on silent mode, because I'm using my phone, obviously, because my laptop. Technology, you know, they're one of my failures. But it's just sent me a little link, which I know is actually connected to my Apple Watch, which is all this technology is bonkers. Bear with me. I need to turn on. It's supposed my Apple Watch is still on.
Well,
hold on 1 second.
That is fine. And I think, you know, as Richie's coming to get his Apple Watch sorted, you know, the reflection is that need for space, is that need to find time that allows you to reflect. You know, you said some of the things, Richie, that sometimes that self-reflection can be scary. Sometimes, you know, sharing emotions wasn't something that came natural to you. You talked about, you know, sitting around having cups of tea, sharing emotions wasn't the thing you did as a rugby player. But you've been able to find a way to reflect, to create space and time. you know, I know you well, Richie, that you share emotion. You know, you talk about your challenges, your vulnerabilities. How did you get comfortable doing that? You know, because I think that was something that was very uncomfortable for me at first, you know, sitting with a journal, writing down questions and going deeper into, you know, what's important to me, and how can I find, you know, the light or the opportunity or hope in those moments of darkness. So it scared me a little bit at first, you know, doing self-reflection. It scared me talking about my emotions and my vulnerabilities, because I often thought it was a weakness. You know, I thought I didn't want people to think I wasn't capable or that I was struggling. You know, that for me was a big hurdle that I faced. So again, when it comes to those things, what was it within you that allowed you to feel more comfortable with that?
Well, it's definitely not an overnight process, because there's been a lot of moments where one day you're like, I don't feel comfortable today. I feel very vulnerable. I'm not going to say anything to anyone, you know. And I think it comes in waves. There are certain times when you feel confident because a lot of things are going well and you've had lots of opportunities to have positive outcomes from sharing and being more open. Again, going back from that male attitude and that ego and that masculinity, especially rugby players, and you know, the macho energy that comes with that. You have to go on a bit of a journey of just trusting the process and knowing that sometimes it will be well received, sometimes someone won't be ready to hear it because of where they are. So if you make it more about you doing what's right for you and being intuitive, and I just believe in yourself, that it's part of you unwrapping emotion that is so much more powerful when you're able to express it more openly. And eventually, especially now, there are a lot more open minds to accept conversations about vulnerability, especially within guys, and talking about your feelings and things like that. It doesn't make you any less of a man. It actually makes you more of a well-rounded human being, and a man who understands emotion, who's usually a nicer person to be around and is more understanding. So the way I looked at it was I unpacked it in that way. I didn't want men to not feel they were men that I was talking to, especially when I coach rugby teams and the guys hear me start talking about spiritual energy and about connecting with your true self and, you know, being connected with your emotions. Most of them be like, who's this woo-woo fluffy beat, you know, whatever.
Wearing spandex, Richie.
Yeah. So my journey was no different to how I wanted them to understand the connection I had to it, which was, don't be afraid to like open up about things, because it's normal to have emotions as a human being. The more connected you are to it, the more empathy you'll have, the more compassion you have, the wider ability you have to connect with more people and understand situations. But also, you're not going to suppress energy that might become toxic, that might become heavy, that might become super overwhelming. So it's much easier for you just to find ways to express it. And sometimes that means going to places and hanging out with people and connecting with people that will understand. So I became that person. I found, should I say, my voice in it and my comfort talking about it by talking to people that I felt wouldn't judge me, but also kind of maybe have been on a similar journey. So I thought, well, why don't I become that person to people that might be looking for someone like me? So I had opportunities to talk about my story, knowing that they wouldn't judge me, but I was there to help them by being honest about my own path.
Yeah.
And I find we all have the ability to do that in our peers, with our peers and our friend circles. It just might take a bit of time to how comfortable you get it, but it's always worth starting the conversation. Because I think a lot of people overthink that no one's going to understand. No one else is going to get it. No one else will have understood my path and where I'm coming from. They'll judge me. Whereas a lot of the time people will probably go, God, I've been exactly the same. I know exactly where you're coming from. My friend, my mum, my dad have been on a similar journey. I get it. Oh, you know, and all that confusion and self-doubt or fear, all of a sudden it's just, what a waste that was. What a waste of energy. When all I had to do was start a conversation and see where it goes. You don't have to like bare your whole soul in one conversation, But I think, you know, resilience comes from facing these fears, and part of that resilience comes from opening up about the things that you're feeling. It's a good thing to have emotions. It's a good thing to feel fear. But if you embrace fear for too long, right, we end up becoming panicked, and there's a big difference. Panic is frenzy. Fear is a human emotion that we all should have to be able to act and react and adapt. And whether I'm talking to rugby players trying to get more skills, the fear is what we're looking for. Now use that as your fire. If it's in a meeting with a client, it's like, okay, well, you're shitting yourself about, you know, going into a meeting, and you're creating all these context and, you know, dialogue, and you haven't even embraced it yet. Why not just go and be your authentic self and tell your story from here? And I guarantee there'll be a lot of people that are going, that's me. I just think, you know, I know myself, still got fear. We were talking about me and public speaking, and actually, you know, going into big rooms of people that I see as my peers and people that I really aspire to be like, and freaking out and doubting my ability. You know, I'm still facing this stuff. But when I talk about it now, it's like, you know what? I know I've got it in me. I just sometimes just go about it a different way just to build up. But it's definitely worth leaning in. Otherwise, you'll regret it.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think, you know, when people hopefully listen to this back, you know, taking a moment to understand what are the things that I need to express, whether that expression is writing down, whether it's finding a confidant, a person that you can trust in, that you can talk to, you know, whether that's reaching out to a charity partner that can help in a moment, you know, some incredible charities, even charities that we're working with on this campaign that can support people in times of need. But knowing that through that expression, it becomes easier over time. You know, it becomes easier to talk about the challenges, to share vulnerably, to connect into this truth of who we are, which is where resilience comes from. It's like we take one step, we build up a little bit more confidence. We have hope that actually the future could be different. We take another step. We receive more help when we ask for it. And I've gained that from our conversation today, Richie, that, you know, you've talked about all these other people that have helped you. And, you know, you and I have talked a lot, you know, over the past, well, even before coming on this call. And, you know, even the fact you shared that, how you still feel anxious, I'm the same. I shared that with you, you know, coming on to these interviews, I've been nervous and worried and all of these things. But I think the resilience has come because every time that anxiety or that fear has shown up, you take a step, you ask for help, you remember that you have got it within you, regardless of what's going on, to move past this next obstacle, this next stage. And it might be uncomfortable, but the more we do it, the more we begin to develop trust in ourselves as well. The more we begin to develop this belief that actually things can be brighter. You know, I always say that the sun always shines behind the clouds. You know, there's always blue sky behind the storm. And I think when we're facing that internal storm of doubt, anxiety, worry, grief, overwhelm, you know, reminding ourselves that this too shall pass is really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I've loved hearing your story today, Richie.
That's probably chapter 1.
I did say before we
good job on writing a book, isn't it? It's a good job on writing a book. It's just coming out page by page.
Well, I love it. And, you know, you're an inspiration to so many, Richie, because I think when especially, you know, in relation to men and that macho, more masculine approach and energy to life, it's not always easy to talk and to open up and to share emotions. But we are all emotional human beings. You know, we are all connected. We live in an interconnected, interdependent world and universe. And I think when you've got people like you who openly talk about the challenges, the vulnerabilities, the darker times, but then how you share the lessons experienced and how you've moved forward and how you're now going out and helping, you know, so many people with the work that you do. I think it's really inspiring, and I hope that everyone listening today has taken something from this conversation, because I certainly have, and it's always a pleasure to connect. And I know you mentioned about writing a book. You know, no doubt people are going to be interested in finding out about your work. So where can they find out about the work that you do? How can they connect with you if they'd love to find out more?
Well, I think I'd always steer people to the website, which is where you'll hear a bit more about the story and the different parts to my purpose. That's www.theauthentically thestrengthtemple.co.uk, and I'm active on a lot of social spaces, but I'd say probably Instagram's the best way to get some insight and guidance and to maybe reach out, which is just my name, Richie Norton, RICHIENORTON _. And yeah, always happy to have conversations and hear from people. So if people do ever want to reach out, it's always nice to connect and know where they've connected to me from. So yeah, that's where I'd send people.
That's amazing. Well, listen, you give so much away for free on your channels as well, Richie. So I think, keep inspiring, keep giving. I would love, and I forgot to ask you this before, but I'd love for you to create a 5 or 10 minute educational video for our audience that may help them with some of the techniques and tools that you use. Hope I've not put you on the spot there.
Nice, all right.
You've got so many
great now, aren't I? You've really put the pressure now. I've got to do it now, haven't I? Yeah, no, of course.
I just put you under pressure there. But the breath work that you do, the meditation, the movement. I've sat in many classes with you now. We've co-hosted sessions. I'm a huge fan. So if you have got 10 minutes to spare, we'd love that. But, thank you for joining us today, Richie. I'm looking forward to connecting again soon. And it's a real pleasure and honor to have you part of this movement, Real Life Resilience.
Yeah, good to be part of it. Thanks for having me.
Listen, have an awesome day, mate. Okay?
Nice one, man.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.